Hi, welcome to Secrets Worth Sharing, a series all about having practical conversations on childhood sexual abuse, but with serious joy. I'm Sophia, a designer and a survivor, and this very special and very requested episode is all about child-on-child abuse. And for that, I am joined by the wonderful Sonia. Hi.
Hi, everyone. It's Sonia. My pronouns are she, they. I am a survivor, certified goofball, and feeler. Looking forward to joining and talking about my experience with child-on-child abuse today.
It leads us very well into our do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
So there's always a section in the podcast where I try and give really practical and approachable advice. This is that section. And I would just ask you, Sonia, to give a couple of don'ts for when it comes to talking about childhood sexual abuse, but specifically from this perspective of child-on-child abuse. I have some don'ts too, and then we'll move on to the more positive things.
Yeah, nice. My very first do not, as much as you can, center your own experience while the survivor is currently disclosing. You want to, as much as we can, we're human and our reactions are natural. We go to fight, flight real quick. But consciously, I think this is why we're listening, right? To consciously practice. If someone were to ever disclose to me, how would I manage my response based off of what I know from my experience? If I've been abused and I know I'm in my anger stage, am I ready to manage that anger so I don't project that out? And I'm giving them the space to be able to tell their truth the way that they need to. That would be one of the very first ones. The second one, when it comes to especially child-on-child abuse, is not minimizing the experience.
Yes.
We don't want to just immediately brush it off with, well, they were just playing, or are you sure that's what happened, or do you understand as part of the experience? You want to be able to treat that experience the same way you would if they came and told you it was an adult. Mm-hmm. That needs to be validated. So we don't want to minimize that experience just because it was child-on-child abuse.
And I would add to that, my two were, don't laugh at the experience and find it funny, because try and take that action and imagine if that person did that as an adult, like how would that feel? And second of all, don't negate with they were just playing. Just playing has been used time and time again as a way to negate so many types of trauma. We talk about, we were just joking, we were just playing when we were cosplaying as different races. We were just joking when we were dropping disableism jokes. We were just messing around when we took her wheelchair away from her. Fine, you were just messing around. Forget the motivation. At the end of the day, you still caused, this action has still caused trauma and real harm. So I don't understand why when it comes to bums and willies and all those other things, or showing your chest or whatever, why is it, we might internally laugh to ourselves and be like, oh, that's funny, they don't understand. But if we then don't treat it with the seriousness or think about the alarm bells or the red flags that could raise, it's opening a lot of doors, because it's definitely green-lighting a lot of abuse without you realising. It's saying a lot of behaviours are okay, and it's not being backed up with any of the sexual safety, which means they can happen again. Those behaviours can be repeated. And I see it so much more often with child-on-child abuse than I do when the person was abused by someone who's an adult. I had another don't, which was around don't ban sleepovers for abuse reasons.
Yes, I love that. It's not the solution.
Yes.
And your child will internalize this part of here's why can't I go? If it doesn't come with a whole explanation of all of that, it leads to a whole nother can of worms. Yeah.
Why is banning sleepovers bad? One, because the person banning the sleepovers thinks that they've solved the problem, because you don't then have the conversations and the language to talk about the abuse. Two, you create a sense of stranger danger, which then might falsely lead into safety in other people who are trusted. And as we all know, 80% of people are abused by someone they know and trust. So you've not actually avoided the abuse, you've just pushed them further into the circles of people that you trust who could be causing harm.
Yeah.
And three, you create this kind of guilt and shame around sleepovers, and that could be the child's only safe space time away from home, we don't know. But you create a load of guilt and shame associated with being around others that then creates more silence around sexual acts and safety. I think so often I'll gently ask people, have you spoken to your child about childhood sexual abuse or keeping themselves safe? Or even, have you spoken to your child about areas in their body that they can't touch and that they shouldn't touch in others and what safety means? And they'll go, no, we don't need to because we don't let them go to sleepovers. It's not breeding healthy ways to think about boundaries. And certainly not.
They will never learn the skill.
No, but also then it's shot off a whole set of conversations that person, when they grow up, are going to learn that you are a no-go topic for. So fine, you've banned sleepovers. So what does that mean? I learned young that you don't like me hanging out with my friends. So when I get older, I'm just going to lie. I'm not going to stop hanging out with my friends. I'm just going to lie about where I am. You equate sleepovers to danger, especially sexual danger. Therefore, I know if there's sexual abuse happening outside of a sleepover context, or if it's at a family party, or if it's at a sports team, or whatever it is, that you're not going to see that as being abuse because you ban sleepovers.
Yeah, exactly.
So, fine, ban sleepovers if the child's going to have a really traumatic time away from home because they love their bed and we all have our favourite pillow, and you're going to get called at 3 a.m. because the child wants to go home.
Ban sleepovers if you know that the house that they're going to, there's rumors that something's happening.
Yes.
Ban sleepovers there, and then be very intentional and specific with your children about how to manage. We're raising, what do they say? The adults of tomorrow?
Yeah.
We're giving the skill sets. How do you navigate these things? Yeah.
Or are we raising the liars of tomorrow? Like in our case.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want more storytellers?
I love how every time I say liar, you say storyteller. Do you want more
storytellers with their tummies that hurt and bad anxiety, who have trust issues?
Oh my. That's a whole other podcast about all the physical manifestations of this. But yeah, maybe I should rephrase it. It's don't ban sleepovers in place of healthy sexual consensual conversations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Banning sleepovers are not, they're not a replacement. It's not a one-to-one match for having those conversations. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I had a final one. Don't put attractive kids on a pedestal. And what I mean by that is when you grow up, and I'm going to be honest, I think I was a very cute looking kid. I think I was a very cute
You're still
kid.
cute.
You too. But this is the thing, right? I grew up, I knew from a young age that I was cute because I was consistently getting told I was cute. Or people were consistently joking with my dad, oh, you're going to have a hard time when she gets older and whatnot.
Yeah.
What is that doing? One, it's putting physical appearance on such a high, status. And we know that physical appearance changes, the beauty standards change throughout life. They're always typically white owned and white prioritized and all of that. So it's already a dangerous conversation to be having. But two, you then create excuses about whether or not the person deserved abuse or deserved sympathy based on the way they look.
I think when we use appearance as the marker too, the radar goes down.
Absolutely.
When it's an attractive child and these things are happening, where does your radar go? And I think this is why the reports or the statistics on little boys aren't as accurate as it should be.
I'm so glad you brought this up.
Because we're not looking for their harm in this way, the way that we are for little girls, and especially the way that we are for attractive girls versus a town boy. If your daughter's a town boy, are you going to think that? Are you going to think that you need to protect her the same way that you do for your ballerina, loves pink, bubblegum pop daughter? Is she getting the same level of protection as your daughter who wants to wear a backwards cap and dress a certain way?
Yeah.
Where do we play with this whole idea of how masculine and feminine and how attractive a child is and how much we're paying attention to what's being shared and how much protection that they need? All children deserve the same level of protection and education when it comes to their body and their autonomy and their safety. And it doesn't matter what gender they are. It doesn't matter how masculine or feminine they are. It's applicable across the board.
And we know we've got evidence reports from people who have abused children, and attraction and physical appearance is so low down the list. The most important thing is how much access they have to the child and whether or not they think the child is going to stay silent, which is why kids with disabilities always get forgot. Like, you're so much more likely to be abused as a child if you're disabled. Yeah. And the reasons for that are because people think, oh, okay, well, it's much easier to groom a child with a neurodivergence or a child who's verbally non-verbal, because then I can just get away with what I'm doing, you know? So this conversation, you're so right, this conversation on physical appearance, physical attraction, first of all, it lowers your radar. And second of all, it completely doesn't even match to the motives we know that perpetrators have. Which leads me to my second point, like related to this, is I remember when I was younger, and again, like growing up in the 90s, noughties, all of that kind of thing, going on a very reputable UK charity website, and I think I Googled something like, have I been abused? Yeah, that was it. So I Googled, had I been abused? I was linked to this really reputable UK charity, and it was basically an info site for parents. So not for kids, but for parents about spotting signs with their children. And one of the signs that it said was deliberately trying to put on weight so as to appear as unattractive to perpetrators. And I still remember it now. I tried to look for it. They've taken it off now. But I remember even as a kid thinking, that's so weird. I would never have thought of that. Like, it would never have crossed my mind. Like, what I was trying to do to protect myself was wear, like, I remember going to bed wearing like 4 layers of pajamas.
Yeah, you're like all the...
Yeah, and someone being like to me, why are you in so many pajamas? I was like, it's fashion. Again, storytelling.
Storytelling. We love
Exactly, because I can't be like, oh, because I don't want anyone to be able to lift them up. I used to be like, yeah, I love fashion. I love being hot in bed. I love sweating my tits off in bed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I need my layers. Yeah.
Yeah. Or I used to be like, your house is so cold compared to mine, which is why I have to wear like 4 layers of pajamas. What lies? They blasted up that heating, and I was there like...
just like sweating, but at this point you're like, I'm keeping myself safe, and look, whatever story we need to tell you so you're okay is what you're gonna get.
Yeah. But this is the thing, like that line of thinking was even being endorsed by charities to be like, oh, so then you're thinking, okay, what about fat phobia? So now we're not looking out for kids who are fat who are being abused. And
because why would anyone view, and it's where we put that same lens of traditional, like societal, like attractive standards on children too. And you see it when, like, I get really icky when I see on Instagram, like all these like beautiful babies, and they all pretty much look the same for the most part. And it follows that same line, like who's giving care for the kid that they think is super chunky and not attractive or any of these other things. And my experience is a little bit different because I think I ended up merging into that when I used to be extremely I used to be as a kid, bubblegum pop pink, like super girly. And once my older cousin, the one who was like almost 20 years older than me, once the beef started with him, I started merging into like wearing sweatpants only. And there were some other things that came along with that. At that point, I was like getting bigger. I was like one of the bigger kids in my class and wanting to like fade into the background because I don't want to draw attention to this thing. And now I'm getting more context and information about how this like abuse is bad. So I definitely don't want to be viewed. And now I'm internalizing I'm a bad person. And what do we think that means? Like if I'm overweight, if I'm this, if I look this way, then that is acceptable because I am bad. And here's where this line is. And if I'm bad, people don't want you around. So if you don't want me around, then I'm not going to get abused.
Yeah.
And
yeah, so much is around the stories we weave ourselves, isn't it? And again, if there's no one to catch that, there's no one to challenge that way of thinking. So then you could very easily grown up being like, okay, the way to not be abused is to only wear sweatpants and give up all my bubblegum pop princess. And thank God you reclaimed a little bit of that, because I remember when I met you a few weeks ago, you were in like this all lilac number. I was like, oh,
I am in my pink pastel era, and I have been loving it. It's such a thing for me as like, I'm 5'11".
Wow.
And yeah, I'm super tall, super fit. And for so long, it felt like, this is why I love the trans community and the non-binary community, because it's giving me so much of my femininity back by being able to say, wait, hold on, there's no standard for this, for who gets to be ultra feminine and who gets to wear the ultra feminine. Like the color pink does not belong to this group of people.
Yeah.
And if you wear these colors and if you put yourself out there and if you love them, that doesn't mean anything other than it makes you feel good. But yeah, it's been a thing. My apartment is pink down to the socks. I've got like...
Oh, thank you so much for bringing that up though. Because
like,
it's such another part of the intersection that we don't talk about. I wanted to move on to our do's because I think we're growing more and more positive. So let's just roll it out to the end. What are some do's that people should think about, especially when they're talking about child on child abuse?
So many do's. My very first one, it ties to the do not previously, but a different framing if it's helpful, is to do follow the lead of the survivor in their reaction and response while telling the story.
Yeah.
If someone is disclosing to you for the first time and they're using humor, even though it might make you uncomfortable, do lean into the fact that they're using humor. Maybe don't joke back, but you don't want to correct how they're delivering it, right? If you don't feel good, like if you don't have the relationship where you can riff back, like I was talking to my best friend and I was telling him about my experience and I was like, I just feel like I fucked all these people's lives up and I'm just a fucked up person. He's like, yeah, you are fucked up. And like, I needed that because we have that rapport.
Yeah.
But do follow the lead of the survivor in their reaction and response. If they're coming to you from a place of anger, you have to let them sit in that anger. You don't want to, if it's the first time you're having that conversation, do not redirect their reaction or response. If they're coming from a place of being nonchalant and they're not ready to go dive into the weeds on it, you have to follow their lead initially until you can continue to build that conversation where you're talking about it a little bit more. And maybe you do need to get to a space of, okay, I see that you're still coping with humor, but I do want to get you help and I'm going to take a more serious approach. So there's balancing it out where you want to follow that survivor's lead because you don't want to push too much. And now they don't, like the trust is gone. So you have to play that delicate line of that. But definitely in that initial disclosure, you want to follow their lead. As the conversations continue, I think that's when you want to take the approach that might be best. If someone's a little bit younger coming to you and they're coming with a humorous approach, you do want to protect them and that should still happen. It doesn't mean like, oh, she says she doesn't care. You should still keep that in your back pocket, right?
Absolutely.
This is something that I need to circle back to and I'm going to check in. But I'm not going to, if someone's telling me like this happened and I'm over it and I don't care, I'm not going to be like, this is bad, you're in danger. I'm going to like, that's going to freak them out because they're not there yet. And you have to walk that line with the survivor because it's their experience at the end of the day. And once you start centering yourself, like there is a way to still get someone help and protect them without completely overriding their part of the experience.
Yeah, and you talk about having something in your back pocket, right? That's exactly why these conversations need to be happening gradually, but frequently and often. Because, that first time someone's having that conversation, let them get that anger out. Let them process it through humor. Because half of the time, they're probably feeling awkward about the fact they're telling it to you, right? Let them have that moment, but just make notes in the back of your head. Okay, they've mentioned that they're now worried about going to a Christmas party where this person's going to be present. So I would like to bring up at a later date, how would you like me to support you with that? Or is there someone else that you know that we could talk to about this? Or do you want me to come along? Or anything like that. When we seclude all of these lifetime of thoughts to one conversation, in a situation that you're still learning to process yourself, how are we ever going to be able to support you properly? So really, really vibe with that one.
Yeah. And the fast follow to following their lead is to, like you said, check back in often in a way that's respecting and honoring who that person is. And there's no canned way. Unfortunately, we can't pull out a script from a book that says, talk to this person about their abuse in this way, because everyone is different. And you have to consider the person that's in front of you. But a very strong do is to check back in. I always appreciate when I don't have to be the one bringing up my abuse and someone else is coming to me and saying, hey, remember when we talked about that thing that you went through when you were a child? Do you feel comfortable if we talked about it a little bit more? I have been thinking about it and I just want to make sure that I'm supporting you the best way that I can. If now is not a good time, please let me know, but I'm always here and I just want to check in, make sure you're okay, or continue to have space if you want. If you know the person that you're talking to is like me and I intentionalize all my feelings and I'm a ruminator, You're going to offer me space to talk for an hour and I'm going to take it. If you know someone's action oriented, right, and they need to get out of their senses, if you need a distraction from thinking about this, then we can talk about it later. Let's go to a yoga class or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
consider the person that you're working with and make sure that you are making an effort to bring that conversation back up.
And actually, I would add to that as well. So many people worry that they're re-triggering the person by bringing up the abuse. I think what they forget is that that's been in their head for years. They're always thinking about it. And actually, when you bring it up, it's actually a release. It's a relief because you don't want to be the one bringing up all the depression, all the Debbie Downer all the time.
God, here I go, talking about my trauma again. Like,
exactly.
When you give someone permission to do it, it feels so much better. And even if they don't take you up on that offer right away, just know that means the world to know that someone's like, I'm back to check in again.
Yeah. And that's something. So since coming out on this platform, obviously quite a few people in my life have come to me about it. And I've just said to them, look, obviously, thank you so much for telling me. We talk it through. I meet them where they are, whatever. But then I'll always say something like, one, I don't want you to feel like just because I do work in this space that I'm going to consistently bringing it up. But is it okay that I check in on you every now and then? Because you've said a couple of things that I would really like to reflect on or that I think you might need support on later on. And I don't think it should just be up to you to have to tell me all the time. And usually that conversation's a yes, you know? So one thing I'm really hot on with Secrets Worth Sharing is accepting a person as their wholeness, right? So that's why we focus on intersections. That's why you've so boldly come and talked about your experiences. We accept everyone as their wholeness, and child sexual abuse is part of that wholeness. So it doesn't mean that like every time you've disclosed to someone, now every time you meet them, that's all you're going to talk about.
And that is exactly mine. Like one of the other dudes that I was like thinking about in this space. I think about my ex-partner at the time when I first started disclosing to people, and they had a very difficult time processing this reality.
Yeah.
And our sex life completely shifted, like overnight. There was no longer room for me to be a sexual person because they could not separate my childhood experience with the person I was today.
Yeah.
And it completely tanked. And I think about that from other spaces where now that someone's disclosed to you, please still allow them space to be who they were the day before you knew.
So beautifully put. I have nothing else to add. It's perfect. One of my other do's is do talk to your kids about their body parts and use the correct names. I shared an experience about how I heard a school teacher saying that they completely missed that two children were inappropriately touching and exploring each other because they kept referring to each other as touching each other's flowers and playing with each other's flowers. If you don't give kids the right words to talk about their body parts, one, you make a complete taboo about something they are going to experience later on in their life. But two, you accidentally dismiss, you make that disclosure so much harder because you're physically not giving them the tools to talk about abuse. And even if they do go to a trusted adult, which is very rare, but if they do go to a trusted adult and say, oh, my flower's being touched, it might not necessarily even be received as an abuse disclosure. It might be laughed at. It might be called as cute. It might be accidentally green lighting that abuse. So really gently, in an age appropriate way, talk to your kids, just in the way that your mum's best friend did to her daughter, and then you witnessed that conversation, just saying there's certain areas of your body that are no-nos and are no-nos for other people, and this is why, and it's just about keeping you safe and not making it as this big shameful deal that then the kid's going to have to bash and break the taboo later on, but just doing it little and often, gradually and gently, and using the correct name points, going through a storybook together or whatever. It doesn't have to be a big deal, but it will save it from being a big deal later on. Yeah,
I love what you said. Little and often is so much more impactful than the one big show.
Yeah.
Little and often is going to get the results that you want in protecting your children and making sure that they're able to potentially help protect other children down the line too.
Yeah. My final one, and I feel like some people might find this controversial, but I don't think it should be, do support the child who has expressed harmful sexual behaviour. In the UK, there's this charity called the Lucy Faithfull Foundation, and they're the only charity in the whole of the UK that work with people who have explicitly got sexual thoughts towards children or have offended children. And they get a lot of stack for it. And in 2023, they released a platform called Shore. And it's basically like a support service for children and teenagers who are finding themselves with sexual attraction to other children and are exploring those sexual behaviours. It's for their friends who might be worried about that behaviour. It's giving plain advice in a non-judgmental way. And I just really want to encourage people to explore that platform because I mean, I saw you put your hands to your heart. It's a resource that we really need. And as you said, like children are repeating behaviours that they see or are curious by and have never had the right teaching and training. And so if you give them that appropriate support and training, especially if they have harmed, you can stop that happening again and you can help with that path to healing.
That is beautiful. Like, just to know, right? Like you said, I'm thinking about like this organization's probably getting flack for doing something like this, but it is the important work alongside everything else. And that is amazing that exists. And while it's in the UK, I'm sure just like I've found this podcast and you're based in the UK.
Just come over at this point.
Yeah. But the resources are available. And that is like the beauty of how vast the internet is now. And like you can go online and look at these resources and have it be available wherever you are, even if you might not be able to get it from your local schools if you're in a small town. Or like, I think about if I was in St. Lucia now, I would have the internet and all these things available because it's so common for me to get to some of these resources, even if it wasn't as common on the island or whatever the case might be. So that's beautiful.
And we also talk about like, I'm all for supporting survivors. I don't think we've had enough support. I'm fighting for a world where we will get enough support. But I think at the same time, we are just propping up a broken system and we are plastering so many things that are actually the root of abuse. One of them is not talking about sexual safety with your children. The other one is allowing that abuse to happen through secrets, through silence, and through creating such a shame and stigma that people then have to learn about sexual experiences through exploring with others. I'm not saying, and I think it is a slightly different conversation when they're an adult, and still there should be support, but in a very different way. But particularly when the person is a child.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where is the good and bad? Where is the blame game? And that
where's the line of innocence? And
exactly.
who gets a chance of redemption? We allow when children make mistakes as a kid. That's why we don't, like, their crimes aren't weighted the same.
Yeah.
Where's that line to be able to redeem and get someone the education that they might have not had to make different decisions? So that's beautiful.
Thank you. What was your last do?
And my very, very, very last do is, do you have the courage to proactively hold space and offer up room for someone to share about repeated behaviors? Whenever someone ever talks to me about experiencing childhood sexual abuse, I, depending on my relationship, will either disclose my experience and I will go all the way to the and then what. If I don't have that relationship with the person as someone who's gone through it, I would throw out this idea around, isn't it so funny how children will repeat everything that they've gone through? And there's a very interesting thing that happens in the world of sexual abuse for children where we talk about it, but there's always this question in the back of my mind of whatever happens after. And sometimes that alone, just offering up that thought, creates that safety for someone to be able to come to you and say, I also repeated some behaviors and I felt this way or that way about it for so long. If someone would have proactively offered that up, I think I would have been on my healing journey a lot sooner. And that's why I'm always like super committed to educating others on why it's important to proactively hold space for it. A large part of that is one, overcoming my shame around it. But do proactively, if you can, muster up the courage. It's challenging to talk about that and to offer it up. And you want to make sure you're not doing it from a space that sounds like you're blaming them or saying like, did you do these bad things? You just want to gently lay the floor and open up the door, because not everyone did repeat the behavior. It's not 100% of the time, but it's definitely something that's common, and we want to make sure we're holding space for it.
Thank you for teaching me that, because I definitely don't do that enough. And yeah, one of the reasons I wanted to get this podcast recorded and out there was because I saw how much I learnt from you from our initial chat. So yeah, I am definitely going to be taking that forward from this conversation as well.
Big ol' heart. This has been...
God.
Yeah, like finger hearts.
Oh, I'm more of a this one.
Yeah, this is, yeah. It's the 3-year age gap between the two of us here.
Yeah, I was like, what the hell is this?
You're like, what's the...
Like, are you doing claws at me? No, but
this
thank
beautiful.
you.
Yeah.
It has been beautiful. And I hope one day I actually get to meet you.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen. I have faith that it will.
Thank you so much for listening to what we had to say about this theme. Did you know you can also find the longer version of the episode and the do's and don'ts episode in the same place on our website? Just head to www.secretsworthsharing.com/content and you can find all the episodes linked by theme alongside the transcripts, written text versions of the do's and don'ts, and video versions of all of our content. See you there. Thank you for having a difficult conversation with serious joy. Bye.